When did everything start to go wrong? Give it back, my life. Without the energy to move to the bedroom, I quietly fell asleep on the living room sofa that night. A few days later, my son-in-law, Ryan, stopped by before heading to work.
It'll be over soon.
Was all he said before leaving for the office. There was something unsettling about his uncharacteristically firm tone, but I didn't think too much of it. That evening, my husband, David, came home without even saying hey and headed straight to the bathroom. Seeing his back, I found that I no longer felt anything. Even though our relationship was this cold, the layout of the house forced us to sleep in the same room. Therefore, I waited until David had fallen asleep and slipped quietly into the bedroom. Though, even with my eyes closed, sleep wouldn't come. I kept tossing and turning until the clock struck 1 a.m., still wide awake. That's when I sensed someone in the room. Heart pounding, I opened my eyes, and there stood Ryan.
Why?
Ignoring my question, Ryan yanked me out of bed and shoved me into the closet. Then he climbed in too, leaving the door cracked just enough for us to see the room.
What's going on?
I whispered.
Keep it down.
He hushed me with a stern look, and I instinctively fell silent. He kept watching the room through the small gap in the door.
Just a little longer.
He muttered. I had no idea what we were waiting for, but I reluctantly followed his lead. A few minutes later.
Huh?
I gasped at the strange, unsettling scene unfolding in the bedroom. I couldn't do anything but watch. People prefer happy endings to tragic ones. Everyone wants a story where nobody gets left behind, and everyone smiles in the end. However, is such a story even possible? Isn't one person's happiness always tied to someone else's misfortune? This is my happy ending story.
Happy birthday, Mom.
I'm Jennifer Martin. I just turned 57 this year. At my age, I don't usually remember my birthday, but my daughter, Emily, never forgets to celebrate it with care. This year, she gave me a beautiful fountain pen, perfect for my full-time job. Last year, I think it was a wallet.
And this is from me. Happy birthday.
Emily is married to Ryan, a sweet young man who works with her. When Emily first introduced him as her boyfriend, I was a little concerned. Ryan is quiet and often lost in thought. Nevertheless, over time, I saw the kindness in his eyes and how well he understood Emily. That put me at ease. Even now, though he spoke softly, the gift he handed me was neatly wrapped. Inside was a lovely scarf. He's thoughtful and polite, a truly good person. I feel lucky to have them in my life.
Thank you, both of you. I'll treasure these.
Thanks, Mom. Oh, and we got a cake too. Let's eat.
I'll cut it.
Ryan offered.
Thanks, Mom. Have a seat right here.
The cake was neatly divided into 4 slices. You see, we're not a family of 3. As Ryan was serving the cake, the living room door swung open.
Why is it so loud in here?
Hey, Dad. It's Mom's birthday today.
Oh, yeah. Got one of those slices for me?
Yeah. Here you go.
Keep it down, though. I'm going to bed soon.
David took his slice without a glance at Emily or me and disappeared into the bedroom.
What the heck? He didn't even say happy birthday to you.
It's okay, sweetie. That's just how it is these days. I don't mind anymore.
David used to be a kind man. We had promised each other we'd be good parents when Emily was born. At first, he tried. He'd rush to her when she cried, even before I could. He'd bring toys home for her almost every day. Though, parenting takes time, more than he was willing to give. Slowly, he began prioritizing his desires over spending time with Emily. As a result, Emily grew distant from him. As David was unhappy with that, he distanced himself even more, eventually coming home only to sleep. No matter how sick Emily or I got, he remained indifferent. It felt like his heart was drifting farther away. By the time Emily started elementary school, the money he provided dwindled too. I had to work tirelessly to keep us afloat and support Emily. Lately, though, David's behavior has been strange. He's coming home late every night, and our savings are almost gone. I've even noticed him wearing cologne he never used before. He's probably having an affair, or maybe he's obsessed with some clubs. Either way, I've had enough. Though, he's careful, leaving no solid evidence. Time just keeps slipping by, unresolved.
I'm sorry, Mom.
It's not your fault, sweetheart.
Well, if anything happens, just let me know, okay? We should head out now.
Thanks for having us.
Of course. Take care on your way home.
I saw them to the door, then let out a quiet sigh. Ryan and Emily live just a short walk away, in a house we built on our property. Since Ryan didn't have any family, he became our live-in son-in-law. Given David's situation, it made sense to build them their own place. Still, they often have dinner with me, and I spend more time with them than I do with David. Honestly, with how close we are, I wonder if building a separate house was even necessary. To me, they are my family, and I thought we'd continue like this, just the three of us. However, life had other plans. One evening, I got a call from Ryan while driving home from work.
Jennifer. It's Emily. She was in an accident.
What?
She got hit by a truck. I was at work, but the hospital called me. I'm heading there now.
Wait, Ryan.
Before I could say more, he hung up, speaking faster and more decisively than I'd ever heard from him. What? Emily was in an accident? How? Is she okay? Half in shock, I immediately turned the car around and headed toward the hospital.
I need to call David.
Even though he never shows much interest in us, surely he'd rush to the hospital in a crisis involving our daughter. Or so I thought. The cold, mechanical ringing echoed through the car, but he never picked up. I tried calling him several times, but he didn't answer, not even once. It felt like we didn't matter to him at all. I called his office, but they told me he had already left for the day. He had clocked out, and yet he wasn't answering. What on earth could he be doing at a time like this? Furious, I drove to the hospital. Though, as soon as I saw Emily, none of that mattered anymore.
Emily. Is this really Emily? Are you sure?
The hospital staff led me to a cold room, not to a waiting area or treatment room. Several somethings were laid out on tables, covered with sheets. One of the sheets was pulled back, and Ryan stood beside it. What lay beneath it was unmistakably a person, or what had once been a person. The skin was torn, red and black. Blonde hair clung to parts of the scalp. It was no longer in the shape of a human being. The sight made my head spin, and I nearly fainted. Ryan caught me just in time, steadying me with his cold hands.
They said she saved a child who was about to get hit. That's so like her.
Ryan's voice cracked as he forced a sad smile. His hands trembled as they held me. Half of her face was still intact, painfully confirming that it was indeed Emily. Nevertheless, everywhere else, there was nothing. As the officer explained the situation in a flat, clinical tone, I couldn't hold back my sobs.
Why? Why Emily? She didn't do anything wrong. Why take her from me?
I was overwhelmed, barely able to think straight. All I could do was cry, letting the tears and emotions pour out, fearing that if I didn't, I'd lose myself completely. Ryan gently wrapped his arms around me, his face twisted with grief. I could hear him sniffle sometimes. Seeing my young son-in-law holding it together, I couldn't help but wonder, how am I supposed to keep going from here? It felt like everything was falling apart. The following days went by in a blur. The investigation confirmed it was just an accident, and Emily was hailed as a hero for saving the child. The funeral was overwhelming, with so many people attending. Emily had touched so many lives, and for a brief moment, that thought made me feel a bit proud. Ryan seemed to feel the same, holding his head a little higher during the service. Throughout it all, David never once contacted us. I waited until everything was over before telling him.
I called you over and over, you know?
I said as David walked silently through the front door. He turned toward me, clearly surprised, probably because I hardly ever initiated conversations with him anymore. There were faint red smudges around his mouth, like he had wiped off lipstick. The sight of it filled me with disgust.
Oh yeah. What did you need?
What were you doing?
I was at work. Don't answer a question with a question. So, what did you want?
After the funeral, I had called his office again, only to learn he had taken several days off. Work. Don't make me laugh. However, I was too exhausted to argue.
Emily was hit by a truck. The funeral was yesterday.
Oh, that's too bad.
His words hit me like a slap to the face. What kind of father talks about his daughter's death as if it's nothing? No sadness. No sorrow. Not even the slightest hint of shock. Isn't he upset at all?
Yes, it really is a shame. So, what exactly were you doing during our daughter's emergency?
I said it's too bad. But I was working. What do you expect me to do? Don't make me repeat myself.
He sounded irritated, then walked off to the bedroom. I clenched my hands into fists, anger burning inside me. I was furious, not just at David's indifference, but at myself for being unable to stand up to him. How did it come to this? Where did we go wrong? Give her back. Give me back my Emily. That night, I didn't even bother going to the bedroom. I stayed on the sofa, overwhelmed by bitterness and grief, and drifted into a restless sleep. From that point on, David's time at home became even rarer. These days, it was just Ryan and me at the dinner table. We'd have dinner together in silence, surrounded by empty chairs. The heavy silence was suffocating, and loneliness lingered like a permanent fixture in the air. I hadn't been able to do anything since Emily's death. I took an extended leave from work and spent most of my days staring at her photos. Ryan helped around the house more than ever, often trying to cheer me up, but I could only respond with vague answers. I felt bad for him, but I just couldn't bring myself to care about anything. Sometimes, I'd hear him whispering to himself, as if talking to someone. Even that didn't matter to me. One morning, Ryan came over before work, which was unusual. He normally only visited in the evenings.
What's going on?
I asked.
It's almost over.
He said quietly. Before I could ask what he meant, he left for work. There was something unsettling about the firm tone in his voice, but I convinced myself it must be work-related and spent another empty day as usual. That evening, David came home for the first time in a while. Without a word, he headed straight to the bathroom. I felt nothing. Even though our relationship was cold, we still shared the same bedroom due to the layout of the house. As usual, I waited until David had fallen asleep before slipping into the room. I couldn't sleep. No matter how much I tossed and turned, I stayed wide awake as the clock struck 1 a.m. That's when I felt someone in the room. My heart raced as I opened my eyes, and there was Ryan.
Why are you here?
I whispered. Ignoring my question, Ryan pulled me out of bed and shoved me into the closet. He climbed in after me, leaving the door cracked just enough for us to see the room. It was cramped and stuffy in the closet with both of us inside.
What's going on?
I whispered again.
Keep it down.
Ryan silenced me with a hand gesture, and I instinctively went quiet. He peered through the narrow gap in the door, watching the room intently.
Just a little longer.
He murmured. I had no idea what we were waiting for, but I stayed quiet and followed his lead. Soon, the room began to fill with a strange, misty whiteness. The stuffy air inside the closet suddenly turned icy. The mist gathered at David's bedside and began to take the shape of a woman.
What?
I recognized her immediately. It was Emily. Though her form wasn't entirely clear, I knew it was her. There was no doubt in my mind this mist was Emily. Before I could cry out, Ryan clamped a hand over my mouth. Emily stood next to David, muttering something. As she spoke, David started to writhe in his sleep, as if in agony. It looked like she was performing some sort of ritual to torment him. Watching her, I began to feel suffocated, cold sweat forming on my skin. This went on for a while until Emily's movements abruptly stopped. Then, without warning, she vanished, dissolving into thin air. I couldn't comprehend what had just happened. David was no longer writhing, but his forehead was drenched in sweat, making it clear that what I had witnessed wasn't a hallucination. I turned to Ryan, seeking answers, but he gestured for us to leave the closet and head to the living room.
That was Emily, wasn't it?
I asked.
Yes, that was Emily. Or rather, something like Emily's lingering thoughts.
Ryan explained.
Lingering thoughts.
Yeah. When someone leaves something unfinished in life, they can remain like that.
How do you know all this?
I've been able to see things like that since I was a kid.
Ryan told me he's always had a strong sensitivity to spirits. He's spent his whole life seeing things others can't, which made daily life exhausting. That's why he often seemed withdrawn, and he apologized for it. Emily had known about his ability, and rather than being put off, had been drawn to him even more because of it. That's so like Emily, I thought. She always loved anything unusual or fascinating.
I used to avoid people because I thought they'd find me creepy. But Emily accepted me for who I am. That's why I promised I'd stay by her side forever.
Ryan stared wistfully into the empty space in the room. Though I couldn't see anything, I knew Emily must be there. I'd never believed in spirits before, but after what I'd just witnessed, I had no choice but to believe.
After Emily passed, I couldn't sleep at all that first night. But I felt her presence, even if I couldn't see her clearly at the time.
I see.
But as the days went by, she became clearer. Now, I can even talk to her.
Ryan's whispered conversations had been with Emily all along, her lingering thoughts still present in the house. The idea of being able to speak with Emily, even after her death, was both heartbreaking and comforting. Still, no matter how hard I tried, I couldn't see her. I envied Ryan's gift.
Did she say anything?
The first thing she did was apologize. She said, "I'm sorry for leaving so suddenly."
I wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault. She'd done nothing wrong. She had saved a child, she was a hero.
She was really worried about you. She wants you to recover and move on.
How could I possibly move on? Emily was my whole world. She was my only family.
And she was furious at your husband. That's why she did what she did tonight. I'm sorry if it scared you.
I see, but why did we need to hide in the closet?
Honestly, I don't know much about spirits or lingering thoughts. I just didn't want her negative emotions to affect you.
I understand. I did feel a bit suffocated earlier. Do you think David's sudden return tonight was connected to Emily?
Yes. Emily said she did something to make it happen, though I don't know the details.
Ryan shrugged.
Spirits are mysterious like that.
I had many things I wanted to say to David, things I'd bottled up for years. Maybe this was the perfect opportunity to confront him and put an end to everything.
Ryan, are you free tomorrow?
Huh? Yeah, I think so.
Good. Let's finish this. I want to talk things through with David. Do you think Emily will join us?
Ryan glanced into the air, then nodded.
She's smiling, a big smile. I think she has something planned.
I chuckled softly.
That's reassuring. Let's get some sleep now.
Okay. Oh, and one more thing, Emily really cared about you. Please don't push yourself too hard.
I know. Thank you.
Ryan, likely with Emily by his side, returned to his house. Not wanting to go back to the bedroom, I lay down on the living room sofa. This time, sleep came easily, and I drifted into the deepest, most peaceful slumber I'd had in a long time. Even though the sofa wasn't the most comfortable place to sleep, I woke up feeling refreshed. The sound of birds chirping greeted me, and sunlight streamed through the gaps in the curtains. It was a surprisingly pleasant morning. As I sat on the sofa, lost in thought, a loud shout suddenly came from the bedroom, followed by the sound of frantic footsteps.
Jennifer, I was wrong. I've been cheating on you all this time. I'm sorry. Please forgive me.
David burst into the living room. Stunned, I could only assume that Emily had visited him in a dream and said something to him.
Why did you do it?
I asked.
When Emily was born, all your attention went to her. At first, I was just fooling around to spite you, but then I got carried away.
I see.
I've thought about it, and I regret everything. I won't do it again. Emily made me realize that. Let's start over, as a real couple.
David's voice trembled as if he were about to cry. It was pathetic, this grown man, groveling over the mess he'd made himself.
It's too late. Do you really think I'd forgive a man who was cheating on me even on the day of our daughter's funeral?
My voice came out much colder than I expected. David flinched, startled by my tone.
But you only ever cared about Emily. It's your fault. You ignored me.
He shouted, his voice growing louder in desperation. Just then, the front door opened, and Ryan walked in. David froze, staring not at Ryan but at the empty space beside him. He began to shake uncontrollably.
Oh, so you can see her.
Ryan said quietly.
No, Emily, it's not what you think. I wasn't ignoring you. I was just lonely. I wanted to go to your funeral. I really did.
David's voice was frantic as he spoke to the invisible presence in the room. Though I knew his words were meaningless to Emily.
She's furious for Jennifer's sake.
Though I couldn't see her, David's panic told me everything. I knew Emily was there, and she wasn't buying his excuses.
I cheated because Jennifer ignored me.
David wailed.
You took her away from me. Why do I have to explain myself to you?
No father should ever say that his daughter stole his wife. We had promised to raise Emily together, and David had broken that promise. He had pushed the responsibility onto others and refused to face the consequences of his actions.
Jennifer, please forgive me. If you don't, I don't know what Emily will do to me.
David begged, his voice filled with fear. Even at the brink of collapse, all David cared about was saving himself. Ryan, standing beside me, looked at him with quiet disbelief.
Come on, Jennifer. I'm your husband. And I'm Emily's father. Let's talk this through. We can work it out, right?
I shook my head, exhausted and disgusted. Why had I stayed with this man for so long? I should have realized how absurd all of this was a long time ago. Today, I can finally say goodbye to this vague, miserable life.
I no longer see you as my husband or Emily's father. Just disappear from my life.
The moment I said it, David's eyes widened and his head drooped. He stared at the floor, muttering incomprehensibly to himself. I instinctively stepped closer, confused by his sudden behavior, but Ryan stopped me, saying,
It's okay.
Then, I felt as if someone gently embraced me. Although all I could see was David, sitting lifelessly in front of me. I just knew it must be Emily. Even though I couldn't see, hear, or touch her, I was certain she was holding me. A warm sensation spread through me.
Thank you,
I whispered, hugging her back. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard her say,
I'm sorry.
You don't need to apologize. Of course, I miss you terribly, but I'm happy I got to feel you one last time. Thank you for everything, Emily. Be happy.
The warmth and sense of her presence slowly faded away. I reached out desperately, trying to grab hold of her again, but my hands grasped nothing but air.
You're incredible, Jennifer. Emily looked the happiest I've ever seen her.
Ryan said softly. As her mother, I knew there were probably more things I could have done for her. Though, hearing Ryan's words gave me some peace. If Emily was content, that was enough for me. I would carry my regrets to the grave.
Oh,
David sat frozen, his head drooping. Afterward, we admitted him to a psychiatric facility. Sometimes, he would regain lucidity, only to tremble in fear and start muttering again. Even the doctors were baffled by his unusual symptoms, and they eventually decided he needed long-term hospitalization. I felt nothing toward him, not even pity. After all, this was the bond that Emily had left behind, a form of love that shackled him.
Well, now that it's all over, I guess it's time for me to go back to work.
This wasn't exactly a perfect resolution. Emily was gone, and David had fallen apart. From the outside, it might seem like a tragic ending. However, I felt strangely free. Years of torment over David were finally over. I got to hold Emily one last time. And now, I have Ryan, a kind soul, standing by me as family. To me, this is a happy ending. I have no regrets left. Technically, David and I are still legally married. I have no intention of taking care of him, but I haven't filed for divorce because of practical matters like medical benefits and the house deed. Occasionally, I check in on him, though we can't have direct contact since he is in the psychiatric hospital. The staff said he still spent most days in a state of fear, mumbling apologies, and it would be a long time before he could be released. I didn't wish suffering upon him, but I hoped he would fully acknowledge the consequences of his actions. Ryan seemed a little sad about Emily's lingering presence disappearing.
I won't be able to see Emily anymore, but I'm glad you seem so much brighter than before.
He said with a kind smile. He truly was a sweet person. One day, we talked about the future.
Ryan, you don't have to stay here for my sake. You're free to live your life however you want, you don't have to stay in this house.
That's true, but if you don't mind, I'd like to stay here.
Why?
Emily always told me how grateful she was to you. She said you let her pursue what she loved and raised her to be the person she became. It was all thanks to you.
That's not true. I didn't do anything special.
Well, I feel the same way Emily did. You're so warm and nurturing. Living here, I've come to think of you as my own mom.
Ryan looked away, blushing as he spoke. The way he acted was so endearing, like a son of my own, that I couldn't help but laugh. He gave me a playful look, but then, as if catching the contagious joy, he laughed along with me. Our shared laughter echoed through the room, and a gentle breeze swept through, carrying with it a sense of peace. It reminded me of Emily's radiant smile from my favorite photo, a breeze as warm and comforting as her presence.